Welcome to Green Building Matters, the podcast that matters for green building professionals. Learn insight in green buildings as we interview today's experts in LEED and WELL. We'll learn from their career paths, war stories, and all things green, because green building matters. And now our host, and yes, he has every LEED and WELL credential. Here's Charlie Cicchetti.
Be sure to check out the Green Building Matters community, where you can have unlimited exam prep for any of the professional credential exams you're tackling next, as well as putting your continuing education on autopilot, saving time with GBS reporting your hours on your behalf. Check it out, gbes.com/join. Now, enjoy this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Cicchetti. Today, we've got another LEED fellow with us. We've got Sandy Mendler coming to us from the San Francisco area. Sandy, how you doing today, all things considered?
Great. It's a beautiful day. The sun is out. Nice to be with you, Charlie.
Yeah, we're going to talk, green buildings. We want to talk about your journey. And that's what, the feedback we get from our listeners of the Green Building Matters podcast is just, man, I appreciate the peek into someone else's kind of career path. We will talk about some other things, what's around the corner. But Sandy, take us back. Where'd you grow up and where'd you go to school?
Yeah, I was one of those kids who wanted to do something creative, but I also wanted to do something that had kind of social meaning to it, that had sort of some larger purpose. And so, growing up in New Jersey and making trips into New York City and, passing through the, kind of industrial land and then arriving in the city, it was really interesting because I was so excited by the architecture in the city, but I was also so aware of like the contrast between, what I had just passed through to get there. And so, anyway, I grew up in New Jersey, just outside of New York City, bedroom community. And went to school at Washington University in St. Louis, and also Pratt Institute in New York was where I got my professional degree, and started my career in New York City working with firms there. And, I'd say in terms of getting focused on the sustainability issues, Earth Day 1990 was really impactful to me. The young architect in New York City in the late 80s. I was trying to figure out what that meant to do architecture that was really great design, but also had some sort of socially beneficial kind of aspect to it. And when the idea of sustainability and sustainable design emerged, I was really excited. It was like, that's it. That's what I've been thinking. That's what I've been searching for. There's a name for it. This is so exciting. So it kind of started there for me in my early career and a long time ago. And and I think that was really impactful to me, that idea of wanting to be an architect doing creative work, but wanting it to have a kind of a larger purpose.
Sure. Well, let's talk about, 1990. Earth Day. Wow. What an aha moment. By the time this podcast comes out, we'll have just done our virtual Earth Day and everything right now. And so was it about energy efficiency then? 10 years later, right? Maybe in the year 2000, that's when the first LEED projects were certified, but early 90s. Can you give us a picture of not just architecture then, what kind of projects you're working on, but sustainability? What were you trying to get into your design?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. I'm just going to rewind for a second too to Earth Day started in 1970. Yes. Did you realize, I was just thinking into this the other day because the 50th anniversary is coming up. 20 million people across the U.S. participated in Earth Day 1970. That was 10% of the population of the U.S. participated in that. It was the largest ever effort in our country. So, it's really interesting. It was this, in 1990, 20 years later, there was still this, there was a lot of focus on pollution, right? Rivers were on fire, the air was really heavily polluted, and there were a lot of health effects being discovered from that. So it's interesting to think and realize that now we're talking about health effects. We're talking about global health effects. Like, not only do we still have a lot of people with their lives shortened because of air pollution, but we also have this pandemic threat. So it is interesting that it started with this idea of this isn't a healthy way to live. And that's kind of where we are today still. So there was questioning about the kind of economics behind what we're doing. But I say Earth Day 1990 was still looking at the issues around pollution and health, as well as the idea that, it's also very inefficient and we could reduce emissions, reduce the cost of energy, and provide these like win-win solutions where by being smart about design, we're solving this problem and providing these other benefits at the same time. That was the part that was exciting to me. It was like, it underscores why being a good designer makes a difference, because we can actually create something that solves these problems proactively.
It's inspiring, and I hope we get more and more. I hope we beat that number with Earth Day, and we see pollution numbers going down right now with shelter in place, and just the fact that we've got the pandemic. So it is a silver lining. Let's talk more about early career. Did you have any mentors? Did anyone open any doors there? Maybe who even encouraged you to participate? Earth Day 1990. Those kind of early influences.
Yeah. So, right after Earth Day 1990, I went to, my husband and I, we got married, we moved to Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C. in 1991, it was kind of a downturn in the economy. And the one firm that was hiring was HOK, because they were doing a lot of government work. And it turned out to be such a great thing for me to join HOK and have that opportunity to work on larger projects, and that cycle of government investment also was really interesting, because there was a focus within government to create demonstration projects looking at sustainability, President's Council on Sustainable Development. And so it was really interesting. And I'd say those early HOK days where I had the opportunity to work on the EPA headquarters in North Carolina, I was agitating on sustainability, and that project opportunity came up. And so it was an amazing experience to work for 4 years as the project moved slowly through the process, because we had to get reauthorized at each step. It created this opportunity to do research. So anyway, doing the research, exploring, I'd say, there were a number of folks at HOK. At the same time, Chris Hammer, who's here in the Bay Area still, pitched this idea to HOK that we should have a green team. And then that became an opportunity for me to meet colleagues in other offices. So, Bill O'Dell and Marianne Lazarus were my collaborators in those early days, and, learned so much from them. And we were able to kind of put an initiative together to do research and projects and share what we were learning. So it ultimately turned into the HOK guidebook to sustainable design that became one of his major publications. So I'd say, but anyway, so who influenced me? Like those folks that I worked with in those early days at HOK were so inspiring. And because we were kind of, we had none of this is done by one person, right? So having people to team up with is huge, and people that share that passion. And I found a lot of people with a lot of passion in my local office as well. But I'd say the leadership there understood the value of kind of letting us explore and push these issues forward. Bill Helmuth was running the office at the time, and he and George Helmuth, they're cousins. Yeah, they were very supportive, and led to a whole series of projects after the EPA headquarters. It was like Nature Conservancy headquarters and World Resources headquarters and National Wildlife Federation. Kind of things led to one to the next, and created a great opportunity to learn. But in terms of people that were inspiring, I just want to throw in there, early days, I was involved in AIA Committee on the Environment. And it was Gail Lindsay, for anybody listening that might remember Gail, like what a wonderful, beautiful person. She passed away way too young. She was like the heart and soul of the AIA Committee on the Environment in the beginning. And she had, I met her through the EPA project because she was out in North Carolina. And she was very encouraging for me to sort of speak publicly about what I was exploring. And her thing, this is a good takeaway. She said, Sandy, everybody has something to offer and to share. Just remember, only share 5 things, right? That's as much as a person can ever absorb. So, we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot that, this issue is so large and complex, but in any conversation you're having, don't try to share more than 5 things. Anyway, just put that out there.
That's a great pro tip.
I was just remembering this morning about her. But then through her, I got involved in the Committee on the Environment, and Bob Berkebile also, what an important person in this movement, and just been so deeply inspired by him. And one of his big themes is he talks about this idea of beautiful pedagogy, that, our buildings, like hopefully like pedagogy, they're teaching, right? Our buildings teach people and they need to be beautiful. And they need to inspire and uplift people. And he was great at kind of making that case that this is all about design and, in terms of the work we do as architects, right? That we're creating buildings that are performing on multiple levels. And, the most impactful ones are the ones that, really catch people's attention. It's about the idea that a building can be beautiful and meaningful at the same time. And there's not a conflict there.
What fantastic, influences, mentors. I think it's so important that we do give them a shout out. We wouldn't be where we were if they weren't there. And you were on some really cool early pioneering projects. So tell me how you got from East Coast to West Coast and how'd you end up in the Bay Area?
Yeah, so actually it's HOK again. I left briefly to join another firm that, and after a year when things were challenging for that firm financially, I kind of looked again at it. I realized that, I think sometimes when you're with a firm, it's hard to sort of see it completely. And so I think stepping away, I was like, wow, there was a lot that was really positive there. And they did offer me the opportunity to come back and to relocate me to the West Coast to San Francisco, which was super exciting because I always wanted, that was a goal to get to the West Coast. So that, came out to the West Coast with HOK and, led to a whole series of, super exciting projects to, my focus was really on like, how do we get these ideas into the work and to those leadership projects? Like, anyway, there are a lot of people always involved in these. It's not an individual thing, but being part of creating those opportunities to do the NOAA headquarters in Hawaii and laboratory projects I was focusing on. It was really exciting. It was great to be on the West Coast. And, that was a period of my career through 2008 until I transitioned to Methuen, and which was also great. I don't want to ramble on too long, but, it was really, I think it was having a long career with one firm was very satisfying. But I also think, like, for folks listening, like, change can be good. It's not, I don't think it's anything negative about the places I've been that I've made changes. I think it's just enriching to experience different design cultures and contribute and work with different teams of folks. So, it's been interesting to make some of those transitions just because, there's another type of environment to experience. So, I guess it was 2008, the transition to Methuen. And, Charlie, I realized that as I was like thinking about these different chapters of my career, it's really interesting that each transition happened at a downturn in the economy, but I didn't necessarily know it at the time. Like joining Methuen right before this incredible Great Recession we went through was really interesting.
Tell us, for those that don't know, unfortunately, I get to provide education for companies like HOK and Gensler, and I'm fortunate to work with, these are some amazing firms and Methuen. So just, if you don't mind, highlight a little more of the work there when you're at Methuen for over 12 years. Like, what kind of projects were you putting out there?
Yeah, sure. So I was attracted to Methuen because of this idea of firm that wasn't quite as large, that had a really consistent and strong design culture around everyone participating in the sustainability initiative, and as opposed to it being sort of a part of the practice. I was sort of embedded at the core. And also, I think being a multidisciplinary firm, as HOK was, but having a really strong landscape architecture practice together with architecture and interiors and planning was, there's really a distinctive approach to doing work, looking outside, inside, and at landscapes. And so that was inspiring for me. And, some of the key projects while I was there, the Chatham University new campus just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, was an opportunity to create a whole new campus from the ground up to be a school, a living, learning environment for sustainability. They were housing their new School of Sustainability and the Environment there. And the idea was, if we were designing a campus from the ground up, like, what would we do? How could it be net positive in terms of energy, water, and waste, and provide a place for experiential learning and a place to really attract people to host conferences and events and create this really unique environment? So that was super exciting. Kind of led our sort of integrated design process on that. There were a lot of really creative designers involved in the specific buildings. And that went on for quite a long time. The first phases of construction are done, and we did a lot of post-occupancy study. A really fascinating project if people want to look it up online, and a great, wonderful educational environment. Also, we were at Methuen, one of the teams with the Resilient by Design Challenge. And that was an effort in the Bay Area to ask a big question. So the Rockefeller Foundation funded Rebuild by Design, which was after Hurricane Sandy. There was a response from the design community, like, how do we respond? How are we going to, fix respond to all the damage and build back in a way that's more resilient? So it was a design exercise where the winning schemes were funded and they were built. And that work is in progress now. But in the Bay Area, the Rockefeller Foundation asked this, and other partners asked this other question, which was, how would we prepare in advance of a crisis? Like, rather than waiting for the crisis and then the enormous amount of damage, how would we redesign our communities now so that we're more resilient, we're prepared? And this pandemic lends a whole nother aspect to that, but they're very aligned. And so it's super exciting. There were 10 teams that were selected to be part of this, and Methuen was leading one of the teams, and we spent a year researching and working with a community in North Richmond to develop our solution. And the Methuen team is continuing and advancing some of that work now. But it was very, very inspiring and like a rich conversation where each of the teams would meet periodically and share our work with each other. So it was this great cohort of folks. And, I think a lot of good, that our community has learned through this experience. So both in terms of the work that was done and the process, that was super inspiring. It led me to change the direction of a dissertation I was working on at USC at the time, focused on how to address the larger drivers behind the sustainability challenge, to focus the Resilient by Design case studies as part of that investigation. So anyway, also finished up that professional doctorate recently. And it was really exciting to work on both buildings and these larger planning ideas at Methuen. However, I think the next chapter you might get to is the fact that I recently joined Gensler.
So I want to fast forward to today, but I don't want to skip past a couple.
Yeah, go for it.
One of my questions, of course, is just highlight reel and just your proudest achievements. So in a minute, I want you to tell us what you're doing at Gensler and higher ed and sustainability. But you're a LEED fellow. Congratulations! You just quickly went through that professional doctorate you earned. So there's been some pretty cool stuff there too. So what else, Sandy, stands out if you look back on the highlight reel? What are some of your other proudest achievements?
I think one of the things I love about the work that our team did for Chatham University, and it wasn't just Methuen, we had really great engineers and other consultants involved, biohabitats and interface engineering and others that were part of that team. I think what was the proudest moment for me was we got this great letter from the president of the university, and she wrote this glowing letter for us. Oh my gosh, Esther Barazoni, what a wonderful person. She wrote this great letter for us about how, and she's spoken about this a number of times, she said what was so amazing about the design effort was that the whole team was strong. Like every individual was contributing, and they could really see and understand the contribution of all the folks on the team. So I think, for me, that idea that it's not about being brilliant as an individual, it's about pulling a team together and having everyone on that team contribute at a high level and having us all share in this experience of pushing the boundaries of what's possible. To me, that makes me feel so great. It was a great recognition of what we accomplished as a team. And I think that's where I try to go with my professional work. How do we pull out, what folks can do together?
It's so exciting. Thanks for sharing that. Part of the podcast is telling stories and looking back, and it's okay to look back on that highlight reel. We don't do it enough. So now take us to today. You're at Gensler. This is something earlier in 2020 you've moved over to do. And so tell us what's keeping you busy today.
Yeah. So I've only been at Gensler for a little over a month, and it's been very recent. And, it was a choice to say, I guess I feel like now that my kids are kind of launched, my kids are on their own now and doing really interesting things. And then, there's such a need to address these issues of, as I dug in on that professional doctorate, I realized like things are so much more challenging than even I, as somebody who's been in this field my whole career, realizes. And so, kind of digging in on the issues of sustainability and, systemic inequality and the fact that we're not going to solve the sustainability challenge without addressing the inequality challenge. And so I guess I feel like my kids are launched. These issues are really large and difficult. The potential for change is, it's really needed. This is a really important time we're all in right now. I feel like this is an incredibly important time and a very rich and creative time. And so as much as I love Methuen, it's an amazing practice. I felt like I wanted more colleagues and a larger kind of platform to work from, just to be able to just dig in and do the work. So, that led me to Gensler. I was attracted to Diane Hoskins speaking at the COP, the climate conference, and talking about, the commitment to be net zero carbon across the platform by 2030 and all the work that Gensler does, over 1 billion square feet a year, and, going deeper in that, as well as the fact that the firm does such interesting and diverse work. So, and that they wanted somebody to help them lead their education practice. So I think I was really attracted to that and just wanting to do the work. And, we're kicking off a project right now for City College of San Francisco, a new student success center. It's just like such a wonderful project type. It's a design build. We're working with Excel Construction. But, it's like this idea when I was just saying earlier about the inequality challenge and the sustainability challenge. Like, this is a building. The community colleges are so important to provide pathways of opportunity for people in communities and provide economic development to the community largely. And the Student Success Center is all about like how to help students be successful. So it's a project with this mission about strengthening communities, and it's also going to be a net zero ready project. It's going to be a smart, high performance building. It's going to be inspiring. It'll be the gateway, the edge of the campus. Everyone that comes to the campus will come past this. So it's an opportunity to make a big statement, to act as, support resilience in the community. And, it's one of these projects that, these projects are everywhere, right? But it's exciting to focus on the larger purpose as well as the performance, as well as the aesthetics with a really strong team. I feel like that's what we're doing.
What a great set of projects to work on. And, I know in California, of course, you have a lot more net zero ready, as you say, 2030, and just pushing us as hard as we can on our new construction. And it's fantastic. Well, I'd love to ask this question to all my green building podcast guests, Sandy. If you had a crystal ball, where's this sustainability movement shifting next? What do you think we should be reading up on now?
Yeah, good question. I think people are experimenting with what word to use, right? Is sustainability? I don't think sustainability is the goal, right? Sustainability is sustaining what we have. Some people would say sustainability, if we're not careful, sustains inequities. So I think, health and well-being is the larger goal. And, we can't, and we even have like a healing exercise to go through in terms of the damage that's been done. So I think that, focusing on how we're more resilient, but also how we transform going forward. Like, how do we take what we have? We want to reduce all the negative impacts, but it's not really enough to just reduce the negative impacts. We actually really have to build the much more positive, healthy, vibrant set of systems and infrastructure, for the future. And so that to me is the really inspiring part, because, what we have today is not that great. I think we have beautiful places for people to live, but across the board, we have a lot of, places that are auto-dominated and impacted by pollution and not very inspiring and uplifting. So if we, I think that's what we have to do as a profession, is really focus on what that positive image is, that vision is that we're going towards, and look forward and put forward, like, this is going to be such an important time in our profession to sort of put that positive vision forward about the healthy, vibrant in place for communities. So I think it does, I think we need to look beyond individual buildings into like the patterns of development and the way neighborhoods are built. And we have to find the way as architects to not just work where the most resources are, but to also work where there aren't enough resources, but we can unlock a lot of opportunity and a lot of great things through design. So there are some firms that are putting their attention on that very intentionally. And I think, at Gensler, we're looking at it as well. How do we bring our design talents more broadly to the problems that are out there instead of, take more of a leadership role in terms of envisioning the future that we'd like to see.
Sure. Wow. No, that's so great. Thank you. And I agree. And especially, the idea of, for example, let me know if you agree with this, is let's say we're improving recycling at a building, right? We can try to hit a higher percentage diversion, or we could talk about what would it take to go to zero waste. And it's sometimes we're focused just on, to your point, I think maintaining, sustaining, being resilient, which are all super important. So hopefully everyone listening realizes great programs out there, great practices. If you're not doing it, get there first. But, sometimes we don't focus on the bigger prize, which, hey, how could we do zero waste instead of just 40, 50, 60% diversion? So not sure if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. And compostables and looking at waste as a resource. Bill McDonough said that early on, waste equals food. So yeah, those are exciting transformations. And you're right. I mean, all of this is layering on top of the knowledge that people have been building in the areas of sustainability and resilience. And it's all, this is all an evolution of that thinking.
Yeah, that's great. Just a few more questions here. This is just fantastic. Let's talk a little more about you. Sandy, what would you say is your gift? What are you best at?
Ooh, I like to ask the big questions and, hopefully listen really carefully to the answers. And, I do a lot of facilitation work with teams and clients in the early stages of projects, and also kind of checking back to make sure we're doing all of those things we decided would guide a project forward. So I think it's a matter of to bring people together, ask the big questions, and really elevate the conversation about what's possible.
Sure. Okay. That's good. As we get to know each other a little more, I'm curious, do you have any other best practices there? One of your early mentors, make sure you only tell people 5 things. It's all they can process. Love it. What other pro tips, what other routines or rituals maybe do you do that help you stay on point that you could share about?
The risk of getting beyond 5 things. No, I think I've been getting more into a regular morning meditation practice just to make time to settle down and feel centered and focus on what's most important. And I think, we all have to look out for our wellness. I love that David Gottfried, who was one of the founders of the U.S. Green Building Council, he got onto this whole thing about how are we even personally sustainable? Like, how can we talk about sustainability if we're not sustainable in our lives, right?
Sure.
So I think we do have to do that. I think we have a little bit of self-care so that we're bringing our best selves and forward in our work.
That self-care is so important. You're right. It's the old anecdote of make sure you put on your mask first so that you can help others on the airplane. So let's talk about a bucket list. Sandy, as we get to know each other more, I know we've ran into each other at some conferences like the Design Futures Council. Amazing. Let's talk about bucket list. If you wouldn't mind, tell us 1 or 2 things on your bucket list.
I think, I do want to write another book. So I have been collecting and materials and thinking about that, and the HOK Guidebook to Sustainable Design, which was a collaborative effort, was an amazing way to sort of, I think writing helps with clarifying ideas, and it also creates an opportunity to meet people you'd never otherwise meet. So it's a ton of work, but I do want to do another book, and I do want to travel to provide a broader set of inputs and case studies and, inspiring projects into that book. I don't want to do that right away, but I do think taking the time to clarify ideas and put inspiring projects forward is something I love to do. And so I'm kind of looking forward to that a little further down the road.
Okay. Well, there's always a lot of travel, adventure, but that book, they say we all have a book in us, and it sounds like you've got some more to share. And that's a good segue. Only a couple questions left here. Now, is there a book or 2 you'd recommend that I could link to for the listeners?
Sure. There's a lot. To me, it's The book I've read most recently that I'm talking about with folks that I find incredibly inspiring and relevant to the moment is a book by Mariana Mazzucato called The Value of Everything. And she's an economist. And I think it's great for designers and people in our field to read a book like this because she walks you through the history. When she talks about the value of everything, she says, what is it how do we define what we value? And does that align with the way we make decisions in our economy? And so, there's been a whole train of thought around ecological economics and the fact that, we don't value natural resources. They're not counted as something of value. They're just taken and abused. And that's why we don't track very well the larger, that's why it's so hard for sustainability strategies to pencil out sometimes because there's so many things of value that are not included in the equation. So there's been, Herman Daly and others a whole bunch of folks have written about ecological economics, but she steps like a further step back and puts it into a larger frame in terms of theories of value that have existed throughout history. And then, she's looking at us now. So, and really pointing out the challenges and, it gets to why our economy is so fragile right now and why we're seeing how brittle and non-resilient we are because the economically driven choices have led us to a situation where we don't have strong local economies and we don't have resources that we can easily draw on. So I think I love her book. It's really clear for anybody who wants to sort of walk through that history and then be able to have a larger conversation about what needs to shift in our economy, in our way we talk about the economy and the way we make economic decisions. So let me just say one thing about this because I'm kind of rambling. In our discussion about sustainability, oftentimes people will say, well, we achieved these reductions in energy use and we achieved these things and we increased our GDP. And I just think that, if you read this book, you'll stop talking about increases in GDP as a good metric of well-being. Because I think we need to be more disciplined in our industry and not use those kind of metrics that don't represent what we're trying to achieve as a society. And so I'll go for the book.
It's like just running up the score of the football game. I hear you. So what a good book to check out. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. And Sandy, as we come to a close, just give us some encouragement. If someone's listening, jumping into the green building right now, the green building movement, what kind of encouragement do you have for them?
When we started the HOK Green Team ages ago, we kind of looked around for some really smart consultants that could help us identify what we needed to do. And we talked to some smart people. It was really good. But we also sort of realized that the smart people might have to be us, and we might have to just kind of dig in and get creative and build up a knowledge base. And I think we're in a similar point in time now where there are a lot of shifts and changes, and buildings are going to be thought of very differently in the future than they are now because of the pandemic and the need to think about how frequently we gather and how we gather. Yeah. And it's going to be a really rich and creative time. So, we don't wish this upon ourselves. It's a shame it happened, but I'd encourage folks to, rather than deferring to the experts, to put their common sense and logic and talk with their colleagues and put their ideas together and, be part of a conversation. You don't have to do it by yourself, but I think people should step forward and add their voice and part of this and not just wait for somebody else to figure it out.
No, it's on us and those listening. I hope you're encouraged because Sandy's had an incredible green building career here. And so this has been Sandy Mendler, AIA LEED Fellow. Dr. Sandy, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. Really, really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast.
At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.